Aging Beyond the Binary, Transcultural Gerontology, Gender and Marginality in Arundhati Roy's The Ministry of Utmost Happiness. Abstract. Arundhati Roy's The Ministry of Utmost Happiness 2017 offers an expansive and politically charged version of aging that moves beyond Western gerontological narratives and destabilizes binary constructions of gender, embodiment, and belonging. This paper examines how Roy situates aging within a transcultural South Asian milieu, foregrounding the lived experiences of marginalized identities, particularly through the character of Anjum, an aging hijra, transgender. Engaging with literary gerontology, gender studies, and intersectional theory, the analysis demonstrates how the novel disrupts dominant narratives of decline and reframes aging as a site of endurance, memory, and alternative community formation. By situating Anjum's life within structures of religious minoritization, political abandonment, and social precarity, Roy offers a gerontological narrative that resists erasure, expands global aging studies beyond Western paradigms, and highlights the significance of non binary aging bodies in transcultural contexts. Introduction. Aging, as represented in literary narratives, is often understood through dominant Western frameworks that emphasize biological decline, social withdrawal, and privileging of male perspectives. Such models frequently reduce old age to a problem to be managed or a stage characterized primarily by loss. However, contemporary global literary studies have begun to challenge these paradigms by offering narratives that defy decline centered gerontology and foreground culturally embedded experiences of aging. Arundhati Roy, The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, constitutes one such intervention. The novel's exploration of Anjum, an aging hijra, navigating the layered violences of gender nonconformity, religious marginalization, and political abandonment, interrogates the limits of binary thinking about gender and the lifespan. Through Anjum, Roy extends the terrain of literary gerontology into transcultural domains, prompting questions about how aging unfolds for individuals whose identities fall outside normative social categories. This paper contends that Roy's narrative expands the field by illuminating how aging interacts with ima- marginality in the context where institutional care is limited, communal structures are fragile, and the nation state's imagination erases non normative bodies. Transcultural gerontology and the limits of Western paradigm. Western gerontology has long grappled with what is identified as narratives of decline, which dominate public discourses by literary representations. These narratives conceptualize aging as a linear descent, foregrounding corporeal deterioration and social marginalization. Similarly, Kathleen Woodward's seminal work on Mirror Stage of Old Age highlights the dissonance between internal identity and external aging. While both theorists critique reductive depictions of old age, their frameworks nonetheless remain rooted in Euro American epistemologies. A transcultural gerontological lens becomes necessary when examining aging in South Asian context. where socioeconomic vulnerabilities, familial systems, religious identities, and gendered hierarchies intersect. Aging outside the binary, particularly in Hijra communities, poses further challenges to conventional frameworks. Hijras occupy a historically ambivalent cultural position in South Asia, revered in ritual contexts yet subjected to deep-seated stigma, socio-economic exclusion, and institutional invisibility. Their aging trajectories diverge significantly from Western or cisgender South Asian norms. Royal leverages this complexity to broaden gerontological inquiry. By centering an aging Hijra protagonist, she reaffirms aging not merely as a biological universal, but as a culturally contingent experience deeply intertwined with gender nonconformity and political precarity. Anjum, aging as intersectional vulnerability. Anjum's narrative begins with revelation of her intersex identity and unfolds across decades marked by shift in political landscapes, community structures, and personal losses. Her aging is never singular, it is enmeshed with being a Hijra, a Muslim, a person living on the margins of majoritarian state. Unlike normative aging subjects, whose trajectories are often anchored in familial networks, institutional care, and recognized citizenship, Anjum experiences aging as a process of compound exclusion. When Khabga, the Hijra household that once served as her refuge, deteriorates and eventually burns down, the symbolic death of a protective community precipitates her relocation to a graveyard. In choosing to live among graves, Anjum literalizes her statement she is not living but dying. Her existence becomes a liminal performance between life and death, visibility and erasure. This condition reflects how non binary aging bodies are excluded from dominant gerontological regimes. Without state recognized gender identity, property rights, or familial support, aging hijras occupy what Judith Butler might describe as zone of ungrievable life, a condition intensified in Anjum's case by religious minoritization. As a Muslim hijra in a Hindu majoritarian political landscape, Anjum embodies intersectional vulnerability. Her aging unfolds alongside the rise of communal tension, state surveillance, and violent nationalism. Roy situates Anjum within specific historical events, most notably the Gujarat pogrom, thereby linking personal aging trajectories to national political ruptures. The violence Anjum witnesses and survives becomes inscribed on her aging body, rendering her a living archive of state sanctioned brutality. Her aging is thus both corporeal and political, shaped by memories that resist erasure and testify to historical trauma. The graveyard where Anjum makes her home symbolizes more than marginality. It marks her reclamation of space in a city that refuses to accommodate bodies like hers. Her shack, repeatedly threatened by municipal authorities, remains a fragile yet resilient assertion of presence. Roy's depiction challenges the notion that aging bodies recede from public life. Instead, Anjum's presence in the graveyard later transformed into a refuge for abandoned individuals, demonstrates how marginalized elders create alternatives form of belonging, disrupting gendered hierarchies of aging. In many cultural contexts, aging intensifies gendered asymmetries. Women are penalized more harshly for visible signing of age, their bodies often deemed burdensome or aesthetically undesirable. Roy radicalizes this asymmetry by extending it to Hijra community. Aging Hijras experience a unique form of gendered punishment, social invisibility, and sexual desexualization, combined with transphobic exclusion, leaving them doubly marginalized. Anjum's body becomes a site of cultural inscription. Her wrinkles, scars, and frailties are not merely signs of aging, but markers of a lifetime of negotiation with gendered violence. Orality, memory, and storytelling become her tools for reclaiming her narrative. Her body itself becomes a living text, a form of embodied resistance to normative gender aging. Roy introduces an alternative model of care that defies heteronormative family structures. The motley community that gathers around Anjum in the graveyard, misfits, orphans, political refugees, constitutes an unorthodox but deeply effective social network. Aging in this model does not unfold in isolation. Instead, it fosters interdependence and solidarity among marginalized individuals. This challenges Western gerontology's emphasis on institutional care and instead foregrounds grassroots, emotionally driven forms of support. Transcultural intersectionality in Roy's narrative. The theoretical lens of transcultural intersectionality deepens our understanding of Anjum's aging. It accounts for the simultaneity of gender, religion, class, and political displacement. Roy's depiction demonstrates that aging within marginalized communities cannot be disentangled from broader cultural, historical, and socio-political forces. By weaving Kashmir's conflict, communal politics, and caste class inequalities into the narrative, Roy situates individual aging within transnational flows of violence, identity formation, and resistance. Literature across the lifespan in this context becomes a site where personal histories intersect with collective memory, reimagining aging, memory, resilience, and survival. Anjum emerges as a figure of resilience rather than decline. Her ability to survive trauma, rebuild community, and craft alternative spaces of belonging positions her as a symbol of transcultural endurance. Roy thus challenges the assumption that aged bodies retreat from history. Instead, aging becomes a mode of participation in political life. The graveyard community, the graveyard community ultimately transformed into the ministry of utmost happiness, embodies this reimagining. It functions as a counter institution that defies bureaucratic indifferences, offering sanctuary of abandoned infants, political fugitives, and the elderly. The novel concludes with the assertion that life persists even amid ruins, and that aging bodies can initiate new forms of social and ethical imagination. Arundhati Roy's The Ministry of Utmost Happiness offers profound reconfiguration of gerontological narratives. By centering an aging Hijra who exists beyond the traditional gender binary through Anjum's experiences, Roy exposes the inadequacy of dominant Western models of aging and expands the scope of global aging studies. The novel situates aging within intersecting layers of gender nonconformity, religious minoritization, political violence, and spatial precarity. Anjum's life disrupts narratives of decline, demonstrating instead the resilience, memory, and cultural presence of marginalized elders. The alternative communities of care she fosters challenges institutional abandonment and illuminate how transcultural aging unfolds in contexts where normative structures fail. Ultimately, the novel demonstrates that aging beyond the binary enriches our understanding of literature across the lifespan and underscores the necessity of including non normative bodies and transcultural experiences within gerontological discourse. Thank you very much.